From a new city council coming in January to the very latest on funding and development, I talk one-on-one with City of Charleston Councilman Peter Shahid for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Councilman Peter Shahid. Whoa, back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Obviously, you're a member of Charleston City Council representing West Ashley.
I am.
And as you know, a new city council will be sworn in coming January.
Yes.
How are you mentally prepared for that?
Like I would be for anything else. I don't know what you mean by that question. I'll be mentally prepared, but I mean, looking forward to two, and then soon after that, we'll have a third member of city council joining us as well. Yes.
What is the camaraderie right now on city council?
I get along with all of my colleagues. I have an open discussion with them. I'm available to talk to any of them at any time. Some of us after council meetings have gone out to have supper and talk. I've had some of them at my house recently to go over a few things. So I'm glad that we have an open communication with those who want to talk to me.
Yes, sir. So speaking of your district, what's new in your district right now?
Well, we did finally get past the memorandum of understanding to start the work on the Sumar Street site. I've been very frustrated by the lack of progress with that. I think a lot of my constituents are upset and frustrated with the lack of progress on that. It's taking too long, and I wish we had proceeded with more haste. I've been jumping up and down and screaming and banging my hand on the table to get this thing moving. Even with that, and I have to say I'm rather disappointed with some of my colleagues on the lack of support for that project. This isn't, and I know they got their reasons for it. I respect them for that. But this is a central part of revitalizing West Ashley is the Sumar Street site, the old Piggly Wiggly site. And if we want to be serious about revitalizing West Ashley, this needs to move on with more haste and get this project up and running. So we're going through the process of doing that, the early stages of working with the developer on that. I'll be excited when it's all said and done, but I'm going to keep on pushing until we get this thing taken care of. We still have the road improvements that's down the pike. We're working with that. We also got the project at the old Ryans that has gotten final design review board approval. That's going on. We had an issue with a Parker's gas station that wanted to be developed at the corner of Playground Road and St. Andrews. I was successful in having that stopped. The St. Andrews Park and Playground folks greatly opposed that. I supported them in their opposition to that. It just wasn't a good fit to have a gas station of that nature at that location based upon the access that young people were going to have there doing ball games, and also the destruction of another building that was a structurally sound and wonderful looking building. They wanted to tear that down. So I was a very strong advocate to stop that from happening, and I'm very glad we took care of that.
Yes, sir. And speaking of which, how is the Revitalization Commission going since you are the chair?
Yeah, well, so we had a very good meeting on this Wednesday past, and we received a report on the history and character of Avondale. It was a fascinating report that provided historical context, the development of Avondale, the original plans and the surveys and plats that laid it out, and how it evolved over time. And part of that report included an inventory of trees and structures and other historical context to it, which provided a validation of what I have been saying about West Ashley. It is historically significant. There are certain components of this that we need to pay attention to as we go through the revitalization process, and it validated my opposition to what I mentioned to you about this Parker's gas station being built on the playground. It didn't fit in the process of destroying buildings that are the character of the neighborhood. So the Revitalization Commission is very instrumental in providing that platform for those kind of projects. What we need to do, and I talked with the president of Magnolia subdivision, neighborhood, these are not subdivisions, these are neighborhoods, and I had to correct myself, is we need to do that for Magnolia. And Diane Hamilton did a great history about Maryville, Ashleyville, and we need to look at that as well because they have issues of growth going on with that. We've got the Carl Richardson Park being developed that's underway along with Higgins Pier. So there's going to be a renewed interest in that neighborhood, and so we need to be vigilant to make sure that we protect the character of that neighborhood as well.
Yeah, and that's all part of my running route.
Yeah.
And I was just over on by Highway 7 just a couple of days ago, so there's a new year coming there. But what has been more important for your district right now in the last 4 years?
Well, I think that we all are trying to address these livability issues, and livability issues are a lot to do with the flooding issues over there. And I was just on the phone before you walked over here talking to Matt Fountain about giving me an update on some of the projects. We've got several projects in the works to address flooding issues in Charlestown Estates, Sandhurst, West Pawnee Place. I've also been in the past in direct contact with Charleston water systems because there's some sewage issues that have been causing issues on West Pawnee and also in Charlestown Estates. So I'm aware of the projects that are in the pipeline to get the sewage issues, even though it's sort of outside of our city council jurisdiction. It is important to have these tie-ins with these livability issues about making sure the sewage is being adequately addressed and literally fleshed out, that the flooding problems that we've been experiencing are addressed. So these livability issues are really important to my constituents. And also, this is just the basic stuff that we need to make sure we're taking care of. Picking up the trash, good police protection, fire protection, things of that nature. But we have a lot of projects that we're looking at, like I mentioned to you, the Sumar Street, the Old Ryans are really important. And what folks have not been told enough about is the city's projects and plans all in Ackerman Park area. So we have the farmers market over there. There are plans to relocate within that area a more permanent structures for the farmers market and that skateboarding park that's there. And also the plans are to make sure that we, as that area gets developed, that we are directing more pedestrian, bike-friendly ways to connect into the Maryville bikeway. So we've got a lot going on in West Ashley. We have a whole lot going on in West Ashley.
And you talk about livability. Let me take you to the Post-Sequoia. The Post-Sequoia says more late-night restrictions could be coming to downtown businesses. For those who don't know, what exactly are those restrictions?
Well, so we're shifting gears going from West Ashley to King Street. So King Street, I grew up on King Street. My family had Shahid's department store. And when I say grew up on King Street, I mean I literally grew up on King Street. I worked at my father's store from the time that I was able to pretty much walk and talk. And I know the merchants down there, historic merchants down there. I know how the area needed to be revitalized. During our time, we saw how King Street deteriorated. And we saw what we call Lower King Street sort of come to life much more quickly. We got to Calhoun Street, and from Calhoun to about Line Street. That process was a lot slower, but you see the progress that's been going on over there. And back around 2014, 2015, they had a task force to address some of these issues of livability on King Street. That was done, and it talked about late night openings and closings, and that had a huge positive impact. Now, because of the success of that, we need to make sure that we maintain King Street to be a friendly area so that people can enjoy themselves. We have several fine eating establishments down there, and we want them to be successful, and we want folks to patronize those locations, and we want those folks to include not just the tourists, but we want Charlestonians should have the ability and feel comfortable and safe in wanting to go to those restaurants and enjoy those amenities. So you got to address restrictions on late night drinking, underage drinking. There's been some violence down there, and the things that we have implemented so far have had a positive impact on that. So I think we're somewhat just maintaining the status quo on closings and addressing those kind of issues. But I also heard from the merchants who wake up the next morning when the party's over. they want to make sure that the streets are clean, and you see some of the shop owners, they're doing that. They're very diligent about that. They've got a crew out there in the morning, but make sure that the trash is neatly prepared for pickup. The sidewalks are cleaned off. Debris is picked up. Those are really important issues for the morning after. That I think that our local other businesses want to make sure when they come downtown, it's pleasant.
Yes, sir. Now, if tax-paying businesses downtown have to hire mercenaries, as it is being reported, then what exactly are the city police there for?
I don't know what they mean by mercenaries, and that's sort of a misnomer. The city police are there, and they have a very strong police force. To the point, at one of the last meetings we had with these merchants and these business folks, they wanted to curtail some of the police presence, thinking it was a turn off to people and giving them the wrong signal that this is not a safe area. So, whoever's using this word mercenaries, I don't know what they're talking about, and I will take issue with that. Now, businesses and establishments are responsible for their own interior security of what goes on. So if they're serving alcohol, they need to make sure that people coming into those facilities are of age. They need to make sure that people are not driving and walking away intoxicated, and if they are, that they're not getting into their vehicle and causing a problem. So they have a responsibility to their customers as well as to their employees to make sure that what's going on is safe as well. The police are there to help provide police protection, but they're not there to provide security. There's a little bit of a difference with that. But they're there to have a presence there to make sure the area is safe. They have done that. And we have done, like I mentioned earlier, changing traffic lanes, removing parking. Those are things the police are taking care of. But I'm not sure what is meant by that, and I would take great issue with someone saying they need to hire their mercenaries. That sends a bad message to the city that they don't understand what the police are doing and the presence of the police are having in there. When you are a certain business and you hire outdoor security, that's your responsibility to make sure who is coming in. The police are not going to check IDs. They need to be checking IDs and making sure. That's their responsibility.
I know that the city has hired, according to the Post Inquiry, an outside firm to manage off-duty police officer work. Does this mean only SLED-approved security will man the doors at the Charleston bars and nightclubs?
Now, you mix two different things. Okay, what we did at public safety, we entered into an agreement to help manage the overtime administrative stuff. That's what they're doing. They're just helping to administer and manage the overtime pay and that component of it. They're not there deciding who is qualified, who's not qualified. Now, security folks who are hired and are being paid, one of the things that we talked about at some of these meetings was making sure that those folks were SLED approved, that they had a background check, that they understood some of the nuances of security. You want somebody who understands how to respond in certain situations, that they're properly trained with that, and they get a security background.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Will the city have more cops on Fridays and Saturday nights and have no car traffic from 9 p.m. on?
I'm not sure I understand what you're talking about with that.
Will the city hire more cops on Fridays and Saturday nights for that particular area? And will they have no car traffic from 9 p.m., say, until 2 a.m.?
Well, I don't know about car traffic. They are allowing cars, they're not closing the streets.
Okay.
What they're doing with the streets is that they are redirecting the flow of the traffic, and they remove parking on the streets. In other words, they want to be able to see who's coming in and who's going out, and controlling the flow. They've done that, and that's been a very positive impact on in that area.
Will the city light up streets along with having better surveillance?
So we talked about surveillance cameras and implementing that. We just had a budget discussion about that yesterday afternoon with more security cameras, and we want to partner with the businesses with installing more cameras out there. So that the security cameras are important. You capture what may have occurred when you don't have a direct eyewitness there, and you can go back and look at some cameras and see. We've seen that happen recently with that very tragic shooting that took place on King Street early in the morning. Security cameras played a role in that investigation.
Why doesn't the city invest in more security, extra lighting, and other safety measures?
Well, I don't know, Quintin, if we're not doing that. I think that we're looking at this incrementally as to how we need to respond. We don't want to be a police state. You know, we want people to be able to feel comfortable and secure and relaxed. If there are particular areas that we need to install more lighting, we'll be doing that. And we've had discussions about how to improve those lightings in certain areas. The city is not a non-well lit area. It is a well lit area. Can they improve that in certain areas? Yes. So we'll look at those as best we can. But you just can't have, you can ask the question, well, why don't we have bars on every window downtown? Well, you don't want that. You don't have bars on every window downtown. You can look like you're in a fortress. And we're not trying to create a fortress atmosphere over here. We're trying to create an atmosphere that is safe, that is comfortable, that is aesthetically pleasing. So yes, there are certain areas that we can, and I think you just have to be strategically smart about where you put them, how you put them in certain different locations.
Has City Council discussed yet or decided yet to discuss stopping the sale of alcohol early at night versus closing businesses at a certain time?
Well, we have certain, the sales of alcohol is basically within the province of the state. We have certain leeway as to issuing when we can and cannot restrict that. So that's been part of the discussion about closing establishments at a certain hours, and that's what we've been discussing with these merchants and other business owners is closing or stopping the sale at certain hours. But right now, what we've got in place, we will keep. I think the mayor made that very clear. We will let this play out a little more, see how this works, give it more time. Go probably through a full season from winter, spring, summer, and fall. So far, I think from the spring experience with this, it's been very good. We've got the holiday season coming upon us. It's a different season altogether. Let's see what we've got in place. If that works, if we need to tweak some more, we'll take that back out.
How does the city, Peter, focus on deregulation so that all the businesses can get out of the hole that 2020 regulations and restrictions created?
Quintin, I'm not sure what you're talking about with deregulation and restrictions. I mean, we issue business license, right? And we expect people, they have to fill out an application like I do with my business here about what my income is and my business license I pay for. But the cities controls the opening and closing of certain establishments. But when you talk about regulations, I'm not sure what else you talk about. You got zoning rules so that what can and cannot be located as far as businesses. I mean, you can't put an industrial complex right down on the corner of Broad and King Street. That's a zoning issue. Right. Now, you want us to deregulate that so that a gas station can come on the corner of Broad and King? I don't think people want that. That's a form of regulation. And then you talk about deregulating, you want to allow a strip club to be located on the corner of Broad and Meeting Street. I don't think you want that. We do have regulations that are controlled by zoning issues. Those are in place. I don't see a loosening up of that. Now, we are looking at some zoning matters, talking about the number of parking spaces you need to have. We just passed an ordinance addressing that. One of the things that we need to remind ourselves about is you can't modify the character. This goes back to what I talked about with actually some neighborhoods. Charleston was built as a pedestrian-friendly city. Not as a car-friendly city, but as a pedestrian. People, the concentration of the population of Charleston historically had been on the peninsula, and people had the ability to walk or a very short drive to get there, to go shopping, to get their groceries, to go to the house of worship. And so parking was not an issue back then. And so now we evolved into this area about requiring businesses to have X number of parking. We need to revisit that, and we have, so that that's not restrictive. If a business wants to be established, and we're loosening those requirements as to X number of parking spaces per business, depending on the size of that establishment. So maybe that's a form of deregulation that people have been thinking about, but we want to encourage more of these businesses to come back on King Street, Meeting Street, East Bay Street, and the other surrounding areas without having to have that kind of burden of trying to find a parking space for their patrons.
Okay, how should the city keep King Street local?
Well, the city can do other things in making sure that we get out of their way on certain things like that. And I think the parking is an example of that.
Okay.
To make sure, and we just passed for first reading this BID,
Right.
for beautification. I think that the mayor's wife has been very instrumental in the planting of certain plants hanging off of poles and maintaining that. So there's beautification issues that we can be involved in to making that attractive. Also, one of the issues that people have, we talked about parking, balancing this idea of parking revenue with making parking accessible and not restrictive, so that people park on the street. They're not sitting down eating their meal and looking at their watch going, oh, I only got 15 more minutes on the meal, I'm going to run out there. That interrupts their meal and their comfort and the enjoyment of their meal. So we want to be mindful of those kind of issues. And then partnering with them and making sure that we are creating a atmosphere that's attractive, so that you want people to come downtown to shop. And we've got to come up with a better plan to make this attractive, not just for folks who are visitors here, but for our own residents to take advantage of that. I like shopping on King Street because historically that's what I've always done. But when the holiday season, you'll feel it. Just walk downtown, go to some of these shops, do some of your holiday shopping down there. It's a different experience. It's a much different experience. And that's sort of part of the joy of the holiday season. It's not just sitting at your computer and hitting a button and ordering online. I think, and I'm just an old-fashioned kind of guy, I guess, I kind of like this idea of going out. Because what you're doing is you're mingling with people, you're smelling the sense of the holiday season, the food that's being prepared. You're running into people. You run into some of your neighbors and old folks. Part of that socialization, I think, is really important. That we need to be attractive and get our locals more involved in coming downtown.
How then does the city focus on helping those local realtors versus retailers, that is, versus the huge retailers?
Well, so I think some of that stuff is maybe revisiting and looking at our business license structure on that. And if there's some incentives that we can provide for them, particularly as an incubator area. One of the things that I don't think we're doing a good enough job on addressing that, and we can do a much better job on, is minority-owned businesses, local businesses who want to establish and take advantage of Charleston. So we need to be looking at some of those components of what we can be doing to helping minority-owned businesses, women and minority-owned businesses that are being established downtown and having it. Listen, I think if you were a tourist, if you were a visitor to Charleston, you don't want to go to a place to shop or eat that you could do back in your hometown. You want to have a unique experience and say, I'm coming to Charleston because I can have a particular kind of dish that I can't get back home. They prepare it a different way. And a lot of that's true already. But the same thing with some of the shops. Sure. You know, we have some shops that are unique that you can't get by going down in your hometown mall or your hometown Main Street. So we want to be able to encourage that. Listen, Charleston is just such a rich, culturally diverse community, which was something I was trying to highlight with the 350 Commission, right, on having that addressed to highlight that. And so perhaps we need to be refocusing our attention to these locally kind of diverse businesses.
Any workshop-like spaces for local stores in the pipeline?
I know we have some incubators on the east side. I don't think it's necessarily geared to what we're talking about, but maybe we can duplicate that in the future.
How does the city, Peter, make a concerted effort to create a balanced tenant mix on Upper King?
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking about that part.
Yeah, how does the city make a concerted effort to create a balanced tenant mix for Upper King Street?
Tenant mix?
Yes, sir.
I don't know.
Instead of like all bars, you can mix it up a little bit?
Yeah, and I think that's a good question.
Okay.
It's actually a hard question to address right now off the top of my head. But I do think that you want to make sure that their opportunities are available, number one. And so that we're, like I said earlier, we're not getting in the way and being restrictive. and I mentioned to you the issue with the parking. That's a positive step forward in that area. But as far as anything else, helping locations, helping businesses, they've got an idea and they need the city to partner with them in some particular way. We can do that. I want to focus on taking what was discussed with the bid downtown and moving that over to Avondale, San Brittenburg, St. Andrews area, Old Town Road area, and coming up with that sort of stuff. I remember someone asking me, we used to have parades in West Ashley. What happened to that? I go, that's a really good question. What happened with parades in West Ashley?
Yeah. Let me go down, well, we're here on Broad Street. Let me go down Broad, around the Lockwood Drive. I want to stop at Roper Hospital.
Okay.
As you know, it has announced plans to move off the peninsula, citing flooding as an ongoing concern.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't this an interesting move, considering how the medical district is at the heart of the city's flood infrastructure, a resilience strategy?
So, Roper Hospital, I think, moved for a variety of reasons, and I think that the president of Roper Hospital addressed some of that with the flooding problems. There's an issue with the flooding problem, obviously, and we 2 weekends ago we saw that, we experienced it. It was a highlight. These sunny day floods are a force of nature, but we need to address that, and we need to address that very quickly. I think part of Roper's decision to move was economic as well. Then, you have to go where the patients are.
Yes.
And the population of the peninsula has dwindled. And the Medical University has gotten bigger, and we're very happy the Medical University is here. I think it's just they provide a wonderful service to our community. They're a first-class medical facility. I can tell you that from first-hand experience, what they have done. And we need to make sure they and the Veterans Administration Hospital are firmly rooted, and we take care of them, and we take care of these flooding issues. Flooding has to be a top priority for the city on the peninsula, and how we address it. So you got two different types of issues. We got the issues of a storm surge. A hurricane comes, a major storm comes, and you have a storm surge, and flooding happens because of the rain, the wind, the tide, those factors coming into place. Those are, fortunate for us, have been a little bit rarer, and we haven't had a major storm of Hugo size since Hugo. We've had other storms that created flooding issues and some problems, but not to the magnitude that we had with Hugo. Then you got these rain bombs that occur, and these high tides, these king tides that come up. So yes, there are things we need to be doing, and of course we're having this discussion about the Army Corps of Engineers wall.
Right.
And what the Army Corps of Engineers, what they've got proposed, and what I've seen, I don't like. I don't want a walled city. If you were talking about taking the concept of what you see on what we call the high battery and the low battery, right, and extending that and coupling with what the Dutch dialogues have described as a multi-use purpose. Like they have shown us examples of, well, here's a flood protection device, but you can also have a soccer field or a garage being used. So it has a dual purpose of that. It's just not some big berm or some wall that you build up that distracts from the character of the city. So we don't want something with walls going down on Concord Street that divide the city. We've had a division of city structure with the crosstown, and it had such a terrible and negative impact on the community. That was a wall of sorts. How we developed the 10 o'clock Parkway. You can't have that. You can't duplicate that kind of thing with a wall that looks like some of these sound barriers off the interstate, or some of these walls that come down the middle of the streets. That can't happen. But we can come up with some plans that are aesthetically beautiful, that doesn't hinder the aesthetic views of the city, that create, maybe have some pump stations that pump water out that we've got planned with this at the foot of the Ashley River Bridges is being constructed right now. Those kind of things, those are positive, more forward-looking things that I think that we got with the Corps that has proposed. I don't like what they've got proposed. Not in favor of what they've got proposed. We're going to have 3 new council members coming on. I want to hear from them what they feel about this as well. I think we should delay any discussions or any vote until we have a full complement of our new council members on board with that.
But let me go back to Roper Hospital. They're citing flooding as an ongoing concern.
Yes.
Is that an impact of overdevelopment in downtown Charleston?
Not an impact of overdevelopment. That's not the issue. I mean, Roper Hospital has been here for over 100 years. American University for over 100 years. They have, and St. Francis Hospital was downtown. We call it the old county hospital was down here for a number of years. So the medical community had a very strong presence downtown. That's not overdevelopment at all. But I think from Roper's standpoint, I think they're looking at it from a multifaceted reason why they're leaving. One of it has to be because, and they said it, the population shift. They're going to go where the patients are and make it convenient for folks to come down here. I think flooding was one of the components of that, and addressing that. It can't be that bad because Roper wants to sell their structure to the Medical University. I mean, okay, there's a flooding issue we're going to have to address, but it's not going to be so bad that they go tear the building down and create a park there. They go sell that building to somebody, probably the Medical University.
Yes, sir. How much has the ground in that particular area has been sinking since Lockwood Drive has been repainted?
I have no idea. Yeah, that's a question I can't tell you about sinkage, and I haven't gone out there with the yardstick to measure that. Received anything. I don't know if the sinking is the issue. I think the problem is that we have, as a country, been behind the 8 ball on having a serious discussion about climate change and the causes of that. And there are politicians to this day who deny the reality about climate change. And we've just got to face the music about that. There is a problem with climate change. And climate change has had such a negative impact, and it's impacting coastal communities like Charleston. We need to get serious. And we just had this big international conference in Scotland. I think people were disappointed that they didn't go far enough on addressing a global issue with that. We can't operate globally, but we can't operate locally. And so we had to be smart on new construction. We had to be smart on renovation of existing structures as how we build them, and that we don't exasperate the problem with flooding. We're going to have to build structures and infrastructures to address flooding issues downtown. That's a known. That's an issue we're going to have to, and it's going to be expensive, and we have to be very smart on how limited financial resources are applied to those areas. We talked about on the books, this project called Councilman West. That's a very expensive project. There's nothing in place right now to address the funding of that. But we know what we need to do with that. We've got issues over in West Ashley, in Church Creek Basin, that, and some of the things we've done have had a positive impact on addressing some of that. But we haven't addressed the overall cost of what it's going to take to do all that sort of change.
Would the city consider having a moratorium on new construction?
I learned that the word moratorium was like a 4-letter word. So, we have in the past done some issues of moratorium, but unfortunately, what happens when you do a moratorium is just then you get this backlash because people try to catch up on what was not being done. We redid our flood management policies.
Right.
Those are very positive. It's very comprehensive. I think we're on the right track with that part of it.
And I got one last question because this battery's running out. But
my battery's still going.
I know. Yeah, see, that's why I do Zoom.
Yeah.
But how can Peter, the city, cite climate change and not mention the ongoing construction and fill being brought to the peninsula and the rest of the city?
Well, as I just mentioned to you, I think that our flood manual that we just went over a couple of years ago addresses current standards and policies to make sure that we're not building in flood-prone areas. If you are building in a flood-prone area, you're mitigating it and you're building smart on that. Property owners have a right. You just have to. The issue is balancing that right as to what they're building and what they're constructing is not done in a manner that's reckless or not taking into consideration reality as to what Mother Nature is requiring of us to do. And you do it in a way that is aesthetically proper. You've got several balances in that, but you've got to build smart.
Yes, sir. Is Mother Nature simply responding to a poor, carbon-intensive infrastructure on the peninsula?
you know, there's a map I have in my office right out there. You see it when you walk out. The peninsula of Charleston is filled in land, and our forebears came here, moved from Charlestown Landing to this peninsula. They made that decision, and over time they filled in land. And if you look at this map, you'll see the green area of high land, which where we are physically right now, is original high ground area. I don't have any flooding issues with this building. I'm right next to the federal courthouse. They built there for a particular reason, because it was high land. City Hall was built there because this high land, the county courthouse. They don't flood. Why? Because it was land that was never filled in. So when you move out into the peninsula into certain areas, you've got areas that are more prone to flooding than others because they were built on filled land.
Let me ask you, do you believe city leaders have failed to manage growth and tourism properly?
No, I don't think we failed at all on that. I think that, you know, like everything else, we could do a better job of that. I think that we need to reevaluate how we handle that. One of the things I think that we need to do is look at Charleston and make sure that we're providing for our community first, our citizens first, the things that are important to them. And we've got a beautiful city, and part of the allure of Charleston is when you walk outside, it is just a magnificent area. Mother Nature's provided us with a little bit of paradise. The other amenities with our waterways and stuff, we don't take full advantage of providing access to our citizens with the waterways. There's not a place in the peninsula of Charleston, if you have a small boat that you want to launch your boat, there's no place to do that on. That's terrible. And we need to be looking at that in a way of what's making our waterways accessible to our community so they can enjoy, so our citizens can enjoy that more. There are certain things I think we need to be redirecting on and readdressing. That's just some of those issues I think we need to be doing in the future.
Councilman Peter Shahid, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you. Take care.
Likewise.
Bye.